Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to talk about a few things that I believe are very important for new players to know, things that veterans already know, and they're going to put them to very good use starting with day one of our Western release. Some of these things include the reason why veterans want to zoom to 50 as fast as possible, why they want to get to tier 3 patch as soon as possible, why they make alts, etc. I want to help those of you that are new understand the value of this process, the fact that it's actually not a chore, it's really fun. You do everything that everyone else does, only at a more efficient pace in that regard. You leave some stuff behind, or you leave some stuff aside, you put them aside for later, some content, and just focus on things that will make you happier in the bigger picture, in the long-term run. Worth mentioning that detailed guides, dedicated videos for some of the things you're going to hear today are coming on my YouTube channel before most of you are actually ever going to need them. I will have them up, and I will also link them in the description of this video in case you're watching this later on next week. Definitely advise subscribing to my YouTube channel, not only for these videos, for my videos, but also for the fact that I'm live here on my channel every week. And I have a live video podcast with other content creators also here on my channel. So mega value to press that subscribe button. Let's start with the leveling up process. The reason why veterans want to be 50 as soon as possible is because everything opens up at level 50. Gear progression, for example, you can start with it at level 50, and that results in working towards higher goals, such as reaching tier 3 content as soon as possible. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Now, also at level 50, you have content that has a daily or a weekly cooldown. You have events, for example. The more time you spend during your leveling up process, the more of these dailies and maybe weeklies or events you're gonna miss compared to someone who just zooms there. Now, I know that there's a lot of you who are new, and by the way, I appreciate you watching me and following me, thank you. And you're so innocent also, you remind me of myself back in 2018. I also took my time with leveling, and the advice that I'm gonna give to you is that you level up your first character at a memory making pace. I have really good memories from my first character, the first ever time I leveled up to 50, and so should you. But after that, your second character, if you want to create an alt, don't do it. You don't need to gather rocks or chase vistas at level 27, in case you didn't know, right? You can always come back to these zones and do everything that you've left behind. That includes gatherables and map completion and quests, everything. Thing number 2, tightly connected to leveling up, are alts, aka playing several characters. Veterans will have alts for one simple reason: helping their main progress faster by farming gold and gear enchantment materials. Now that you know why, let me tell you how. For example, instanced content such as Guardian Raids has cooldowns for each character individually, and it rewards you with tradable mats amongst other goodies. So you can send them to your main. Another example are the Abyss dungeons. You can do each one once per character per week. They reward gold, which is the most important currency in game, and is account-wide too. So all of your characters share the same pool of gold on that server. Abyss dungeons also drop accessories. Selling accessories on the auction house is one of the top money makers. That's because accessories have combat stats and engraving points on them, and they are randomized. So in order to really get that perfect necklace for your class, you really need to get very lucky. Or someone else gets lucky for you, and thus the auction house, yeah? Engraving books are also a drop from both raiding and Abyss dungeons. So again, more alts, more entries, more gold, more drops, either for you or just to sell. Very important to note that alts become very useful only in tier 3 content. That is because tier 1 and 2 is a pass-by stage in terms of gear. So not many people will buy your accessories regardless of how perfect they are, since they will replace them shortly after. Not to mention the content itself in tier 1 and 2 is easy enough to finish with a soup of stats as opposed to the perfect ones. As for gold, which is the other reason people have alts, tier 1 and 2 Abyss dungeons reward you with 80 and 100 gold respectively. To be noted that all of these Abyss things that give you gold are capped on 6 times per server. So you can still do them, but you cannot get the gold reward more than 6 times. As you can see, the difference in between tier 1 plus 2 and tier 3 is absolutely gigantic. Tier 3 giving you 10 times plus more the liquid gold. But even so, the little that you get in tier 1 and 2 is important in a fresh release because nobody else has more than you. Nobody else receives more than you. Unless they get really fast to tier 3 and start receiving that big chunk of money. A couple of other things that alts can be used for is, for example, buying gear enchantment materials with pirate coins. Pirate coins being another currency in Lost Ark that is shared across all of your characters, and each of your characters has their own individual weekly cap on purchasing these materials. You go on with your alt, you buy them, send them over to the main because they're tradable. This is not a big deal in the grand scheme of Lost Ark. If you look at Lost Ark in 1 year from now, you won't spend pirate coins on gear enchantment materials because you won't need them. But for a fresh release, this actually eventually, if you farm enough pirate coins to buy them on 2-3 different characters, eventually they stack up and you actually feel it. And you can buy it for tier 1, 2, and 3. Another thing is the guild tokens. Your alt being in a guild yields them guild tokens, even if you don't do anything with them, just your daily support for the guild. Eventually it stacks enough guild tokens that you can buy mats from a different merchant that are again capped per character, capped on purchase per character, and you can just send them over these mats as well to your main. Same as with the pirate coins, not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. However, for a fresh release, it actually matters. Lastly, about alts, if you want to go full YOLO, you can create your alt on a different server, for example, or not your alt, an alt on a different server. Servers in Lost Ark have shared economy, so the auction houses together. However, your account is not shared across various servers, so you're starting all over from the beginning. This has pluses and minuses. A plus is, for example, that you can finish another batch of dailies and weeklies on the alt from another server, thus getting Epona bags and putting them aside and trying your luck with the bags of gold. You also get the benefit of having a second batch of energy of work, which is used to gather resources around the world if that's some content that you really enjoy. Gathering resources on the other server, you sell them, you make some gold, right? Maybe you can use your stronghold as well, your housing plot, and make a little bit more gold out of your stuff on the other server. Then when you gather enough gold, you simply place an item on the auction house with your main from the other server, and then you buy it with your alt, thus basically giving the gold over to your main. This has some fees, of course. It's not the most straightforward method. You can have a PvP alt on the other server, for example, spam arenas with it. You really enjoy that class. They don't need gear, they don't need skill points, they don't need account perks, so anything works. Assuming you're level 50 to get access to dailies and weeklies, and then the rest of the time, as you're waiting for PvP queues, you just waste your energy of work, right? When you feel like PvPing, gather resources, and shoot a couple of birds with one stone. Moving on. Holy cow, I feel like half the video was on alts, but it was important that you get the full scope of it. Play alts if you enjoy it, by the way. It's actually mega fun to play other classes or even more of your class if you have the time. On top of that, very rewarding, as you can see. Especially later on. Everyone has alts in Lost Ark, and so will you. Not because you need to or because I'm telling you to, but because you're gonna want to eventually. When all of these one-time account things end, like your story and your questing and your map completion, everything that you build up as a fresh release of Lost Ark, you will just have the daily stuff to do, right? So having another character to play more of Lost Ark on will actually feel really, really good. And I almost forgot the knowledge transfer system, which is still on alts, by the way, which allows you to let the game passively level up your alts to 50. TLDR, when you finish Northvern's story on one of your characters, you can pay 600 gold and the game will just boost another to level 50. Also place it in Bern. Should you spend 600 gold on this at the beginning? 600 gold might be worth investing into other cheap items sold by players and keeping them for later when people will pay much more for them, or just using them yourself. Or you can use this gold to buy gear enchantment materials, for example, in tier 2 and get that extra push to tier 3 when you start earning like 3000 per alt. I recommend thinking about this. 600 gold is a very small price to pay to skip the 10 hours of leveling, but it's small when you earn 20k a week. On the second day of a fresh release, unsure. Need to see how the market is and assess. Next is tier 3 content. I kept mentioning it so far. Tier 3 is simply patch 3.0 and the content in it unlocks at item level 1100. Abyss content in this tier, such as dungeons and later on raids, gives you more than 10 times the amount of gold that you used to get from the same content in any previous tier. Epona badges earned from daily quests are quadrupled, so you can get to gather the amount needed for those bags of gold I was mentioning much sooner. Selling the gear you farm is finally worth it because people will pay for the perfect stats since they need them and they stay for longer also, especially accessories and the soul stones. So all of these big money making possibilities open up in tier 3 and half of them are actually liquid raw gold that you get from the game, so you don't even depend on other players, which is great. At the same time, gear progression requires a lot of gold, so whatever you farm is most of it gonna go back into your own enchanting, right? This is also where playing alts comes in handy. That's why I told you that alts are better later, because when they get to the correct gear score to start farming this tier 3 content and get yourself even more of this gold, then that's a big help for your main character. For a fresh release like ours, a benefit of being one of the first to get to tier 3, besides what we already talked, is that you are much more able and inclined to pay what seems to be a small gold cost for cool items. You can pay the price that a lower tier player considers as high because you earn much more and they earn much less. That unlocks the option to buy a lot of crystal or many of the tier 1 and 2 mats needed to boost up your own alt to tier 3, thus making even more gold, and many more benefits if you know what you're doing. Is it worth leaving many things for later, such as playing PvP, collectibles, map completion, the rapport system, just so you can focus all of your time into acquiring the mats needed to reach tier 3 as fast as you can? Debatable, depends on the player. But all of these things that you need to do to get there fast are also really fun. Doing guardian raids or doing your abyssal dungeons or having alts or being in a guild or islands and story, all of these things are so magical in Lost Ark on their own. I wish you lots of love. Thank you so much again for watching, and I'm gonna see you really soon. Until then, take care and stay safe.